Donald Trump is now calling for a government shutdown over unsubstantiated claims of voter fraud. The former president said late last week that Republicans in Congress should shut down the government if Democrats don't agree to legislation barring non-citizens from voting, which we note again, that's already illegal. Trump continues to claim without evidence that many non-citizens voted in the past presidential election. The comments come as Congress faces a deadline by the end of the month to pass a spending bill to prevent a partial government shutdown. Joining us now, congressional investigations reporter for The Washington Post, Jackie Alemany. She is also an MSNBC contributor. Jackie, good to see you. So let's talk about this idea of a government shutdown. First of all, Trump's claims, they're nonsensical. There are already laws in place to prevent non-citizens from voting. How are Republicans reacting to his demand?
Yeah, John, you already have Speaker Mike Johnson pandering to former President Donald Trump as we get close to Election Day, trying to attach what Democrats are calling this poison pill, the SAVE Act, to any sort of continuing resolution that needs to be agreed upon by the end of the month, or else we could have a potential government shutdown. That being said, the politics around the SAVE Act, even though voting as a non-citizen is already illegal in the U.S. And this is sort of a fear tactic, as Democrats are calling it, to try to scaremonger ahead of the November election. There were 5 Democrats that voted for this in July. But the bigger problem for Republicans here is that Mike Johnson doesn't have the 218 votes that he needs from Republicans to get through any sort of continuing resolution, at least in this moment. There's still, as we've talked about really for the last 2 years, of this Congress, there's still not enough Republicans who want to vote for any funding at all, even though it's just bootstrapping the government until really next March, when Republicans are hoping that Donald Trump will already be in the White House.
So beyond Trump's threats, there are others on the far right in the GOP who are also potentially pushing for a shutdown. I mean, that just seems like terrible politics. Just 2 months ahead of an election year, Republicans likely would take the blame for a shutdown. What are the chances this could happen? How nervous are some in the GOP that it could?
Absolutely. You make a really good point. And I should also note that this proposal is also dead on arrival in the Senate and at the White House, and would never ultimately make it through and would get kicked back to Republicans to deal with all over again. But there are a handful of moderate Republicans who are already worried about their electoral prospects, especially in the wake of Joe Biden passing the torch to Kamala Harris and all of these numbers at a state level really reshifting and jiggering, that this is a bad electoral tactic, especially causing a shutdown right before the election. That being said, I think we're going to see the sort of rigmarole that we usually see when it comes to a government shutdown, which is eventually, even though there's going to be very limited time, Republicans and Democrats will sit down at the table, but they're going to have to pass 12 different bills, which is going to be quite a bit of a lift. They'll come back next week and hopefully pick this up ASAP. So,
yeah, you just mentioned Congress about to return after its August recess in for only a short time before heading out onto the campaign trail. What else has to get done here?
Oh, there's quite a number of things. I mean, it was sort of starting already to feel like a lame duck session, but there's actually some big ticket items that need to be done other than funding the government. There's the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Reauthorization Act. So for the first time since 2014, this massive package that already made it through the House and now needs to get kicked back from the Senate to actually vote on with the final package. We're told that the Senate is expected to have a markup of that final package around the rules that dictate the way workers are treated in the workplace. That is going to be expected at some point in November. That's something that I think Republicans and Democrats realize is a priority to at least get done before November.
And, Jackie, let's turn to November and, indeed, the battle for both the House and Senate. What's the latest that party insiders are telling you as to where they think this will go? Who will have control of those two chambers?
Well, it's really interesting because when everyone left for the summer, as you know, as we repeatedly discussed, people were in a state of panic over Joe Biden. It was after his disastrous debate performance, and the numbers and the polling that people were seeing, the downstream effects of Biden's impact on members at the bottom of the ticket were not good. That has completely changed. We're going now into a Congress where Democrats are seeing a renewed source of hope and energy to potentially recapture the Democratic majority in the House and maybe maintain that majority in the Senate. That being said, there are a number of tight races that we're watching closely from Montana, especially in the Senate. As we've repeatedly discussed, this very tight margin in the House. Republicans have a 5-seat majority. There are a number of people who are running for re-election in these swingy, moderate districts who do still maintain a lead. But Democrats are planning on now running with Kamala at the top of the ticket and are feeling much more positive about their prospects.
Yeah, certainly odds are both houses decided by razor-thin margins.